Okay, so this is part 2 of chapter 1 of The Hobbit. Now, if you can remember, Bilbo had met up with Gandalf, okay, and we finished off where Bilbo was trained in his house by a dwarf called Dwalin, okay, and they were just about to have tea. They had not been at the table long. In fact, they had hardly reached the third cake when there came another even louder ring at the bell. "Excuse me," said the Hobbit, and off he went to the door. "So you have got here at last." That was what he was going to say to Gandalf this time, but it was not Gandalf. Instead, there was a very old-looking dwarf on the step with a white beard and scarlet hood, and he too hopped inside as soon as the door was open, just as if he had been invited. "I see they have begun to arrive already," he said when he caught sight of Dwalin's green hood hanging up. He hung his red one next to it, and "Balin at your service," he said with his hand on his breast. "Thank you," said Bilbo with a gasp. It was not the correct thing to say, but they have begun to arrive, and flustered him badly. He liked visitors, but he liked to know them before they arrived, and he preferred to ask them himself. He had a horrible thought that the cakes might run short, and then he, as the host, he knew his duty and stuck to it, however painful. He might have to go without. "Come along in and have some tea," he managed to say after taking a deep breath. "A little beer would suit me better if it's all the same to you, my good sir," said Balin with the white beard, "but I don't mind some cake, seed cake if you have any." "Lots," Bilbo found himself answering to his own surprise, and he found himself scuttling off too, to the cellar to fill a pint beer mug, and then to a pantry to fetch 2 beautiful round seed cakes, which he had baked that afternoon for his after supper morsel. When he got back, Balin and Dwalin were talking at the table like old friends. As a matter of fact, they were brothers. Bilbo plumped down the beer and cake in front of them, when loud came a ring at the bell again, and then another ring. Gandalf for certain this time, he thought, as he puffed along the passage, but it was not. It was 2 more dwarfs, both with blue hoods, silver belts, and yellow beards, and each of them carrying a bag of tools and a spade. In they hopped as soon as the door began to open. Bilbo was hardly surprised at all. "What can I do for you, my dwarfs?" he said. "Killy at your service," said one, "and Filly," added the other. They both swept off their blue hoods and bowed. "At yours and your families," replied Bilbo, remembering his manners this time. "Dwalin and Balin here already, I see," said Killy. "Let us join the throng." "Throng?" thought Mr. Baggins. "I don't like the sound of that. I must sit down for a minute and collect my wits and have a drink." He had only just had a sip in the corner, while the 4 dwarfs sat around the table and talked about mines and gold and troubles with the goblins and the depredations of dragons and lots of other things which he did not understand and did not want to, for they sounded much too adventurous, when ding dong a ling lang dong, his bell rang again, as if some naughty little hobbit boy was trying to pull the handle off. "Someone at the door," he said, blinking. "Some 4, I should say, by the sound," said Filly. "Besides, we saw them coming along behind us in the distance." The poor little hobbit sat down in the hall and put his head in his hands, and wondered what had happened, and what was going to happen, and whether they would all stay to supper. Then the bell rang again, louder than ever, and he had to run to the door. It was not 4 after all, it was 5. Another dwarf had come along while he was wandering in the hall. He had hardly turned the knob before they were all inside, bowing and saying, "At your service," one after another. Dory, Nori, Ori, Orin, and Glowin were the names, and very soon 2 purple hoods, a grey hood, a brown hood, and a white hood were hanging on the pegs, and off they marched, with their broad hands stuck in their gold and silver belts, to join the others. Already it had almost become a throng. Some called for ale, and some for porter, and one for coffee, and all of them for cakes, so the Hobbit was kept very busy for a while. A big jug of coffee had just been set in the hearth. The seed cakes were gone, and the dwarfs were starting on a round of buttered scones when there came a loud knock. Not a ring, but a hard rat-tat on the Hobbit's beautiful green door. Somebody was banging with a stick. Bilbo rushed along the passage, very angry, and altogether bewildered and bewildered. This was the most awkward Wednesday he had ever remembered. He pulled open the door with a jerk, and they all fell in, one on top of the other. More dwarfs, 4 more. And there was Gandalf behind, leaning on his staff and laughing. He had made quite a dent on the beautiful door. He had also, by the way, knocked out the secret mark that he had put there the morning before. "Carefully, carefully," he said. "It's not like you, Bilbo, to keep friends waiting on the mat and then open the door like a popgun. Let me introduce Bifur, Bofur, Bombur, and especially Thorin." "At your service," said Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur, standing in a row. Then they hung up 2 yellow hoods and a pale green one, and also a sky blue one with a long silver tassel. This last belonged to Thorin, an enormously important dwarf. In fact, no other than the great Thorin Oakenshield himself, who was not at all pleased at falling flat on Bilbo's mat with Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur on top of him. For one thing, Bombur was immensely fat and heavy. Thorin, indeed, was very haughty and said nothing about service, but poor Mr. Baggins said he was sorry so many times that at last he grunted, "Pray don't mention it," and stopped frowning. "Now we are all here," said Gandalf, looking at the row of 13 hoods, the best detachable party hoods, and his own hat hanging on the pegs. "Quite a merry gathering. I hope there is something left for the latecomers to eat and drink. What's that? Tea? No, thank you. A little red wine, I think, for me." "And for me," said Thorin. "And raspberry jam, and apple tart," said Bifur. "And mince pies and cheese," said Bofur. "And pork pie and salad," said Bombur. "And more cakes and ale and coffee, if you don't mind," called the other dwarfs through the door. Put on a few eggs, there's a good fellow," Gandalf called after him as the hobbits stumbled off to the pantries. "And just bring out the cold chicken and pickles." "Seems to know as much about the inside of my larders as I do myself," thought Mr. Baggins, who was feeling positively flummoxed, and was beginning to wonder whether a most wretched adventure had not come right into his home. By the time he had got all the bottles and dishes and knives and forks and glasses and plates and spoons and things piled up on big trays, he was getting very hot and red in the face and annoyed. "Confusticate and bebother these dwarfs," he said aloud. "Why don't they come and lend a hand?" Lo and behold, there stood Balin and Dwalin at the door of the kitchen, and Filly and Killy behind them, and before he could say knife, they had whisked the trays and a couple of small tables into the parlour, and set out everything afresh. Gandalf sat at the head of the party, with the 13 dwarfs all around, and Bilbo sat on a stool at the fireside, nibbling at a biscuit. His appetite was quite taken away, and tried to look as if this was all perfectly ordinary and not in the least an adventure. The dwarfs ate, and talked, and time got on. At last they pushed their chairs back, and Bilbo made a move to collect the plates and glasses. "I suppose you will all stay to supper," he said in his politest, unpressing tones. "Of course," said Thorin, "and after we shall get through the business till late, and we must have some music first. Now to clear up." Thereupon the 12 dwarfs, not Thorin, he was too important, and stayed talking to Gandalf, jumped to their feet, and made tall piles of old things. Off they went, not waiting for trays, balancing columns of plates, each with a bottle on the top, with one hand, while the hobbit ran after them, almost squeaking with fright. "Please be careful," and "Please don't trouble, I can manage." But the dwarves only started to sing. Chip the glasses and crack the plates, blunt the knives and bend the forks. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Smash the bottles and burn their corks. Cut the cloth and tread on the fat. Pour the milk on the pantry floor. Leave the bones on the bedroom mat. splash wine on every door. Dump the crocks in a boiling bowl, pound them up with a thumping pole, and when you've finished, if any are whole, send them down the hall to roll. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates, so carefully, carefully with their plates. And of course, they did none of these dreadful things, and everything was cleaned and put away as quick as lightning, while the Hobbit was turning round and round in the middle of the kitchen, trying to see what they were doing. When they went back and found Thorin with his feet on the fender smoking a pipe. It was blowing the most enormous smoke rings, and wherever he told one to go it went, up the chimney, or behind the clock on the mantelpiece, or under the table, or round and round the ceiling. But wherever it went, it was not quick enough to escape Gandalf. Pop! He sent a smaller smoke ring from his short clay pipe straight through each of one of Thorin's. Then Gandalf's smoke ring would go green and come back to hover over the wizard's head. He had a cloud of them about him already, and in the dim light it made him look strange and sorcerous. Bilbo stood still and watched. He loved smoke rings, and then he blushed to think how proud he had been yesterday morning of the smoke rings he had sent up the wind over the hill. "Now for some music," said Thorin. "Bring out the instruments." Killy and Filly rushed for their bags and brought back little fiddles. Dory, Nori, and Ori brought out flutes from somewhere inside their coats. Bombur produced a drum from the hall. Biffa and Bofa went out too and came back with clarinets that they had left among the walking sticks. Dwalin and Balin said, "Excuse me, I left mine on the porch." Just bring mine in with you," said Thorin. They came back with viols as big as themselves, and with Thorin's harp wrapped in a green cloth. It was a beautiful golden harp, and when Thorin struck it, the music began all at once. So sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else and was swept away into the dark lands under strange moons, far over the water and very dark from his hobbit hole under the hill. The dark came into the room from a little window that opened in the side of the hill. The firelight flickered. It was April, and still they played on, while the shadow of Gandalf's beard wagged against a wall. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on, and suddenly throated singing of the dwarves in the deep places of their ancient homes. And this is like a fragment of their song, if it can be like their song without their music. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to seek the pale enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells. In places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. For ancient king and elvish lord, there many a gleaming golden hoard, they shaped and wrought, and light they caught, to hide in gems on hilt of sword. On silver necklaces they strung, the flowering stars on crowns they hung. For dragon fire in twisted wire, they meshed the light of the moon and sun. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns hold, we must away ere break of day, to claim our long forgotten gold. Goblets they carved there for themselves, and harps of gold where no man delves. There lay they long, and many a song was sung unheard by men or elves. As they sang, the Hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands, and by cunning and by magic moving through him, a fierce and jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window, The stars were out in a dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels of the dwarfs shining in dark caverns. Suddenly, in the wood beyond the water, a flame leapt up, probably someone lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was plain Mr. Baggins of Bag End, Underhill again. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp, and more than half a mind to pretend to and go and hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not come out again until all the dwarfs had gone away. Suddenly he found that the music and the singing had stopped. They were all looking at him, with eyes shining in the dark. "Where are you going?" said Turin in a tone that seemed to show that he guessed both halves of the Hobbit's mind. "What about a little light?" said Bilbo apologetically. "We like the dark," said all the dwarfs. "Dark for dark business. There are many hours before dawn." "Of course," said Bilbo, and sat down in a hurry. He missed the stool, and sat in a fender, knocking over the poker and shovel with a crash. "Hush," said Gandalf. "Let Turin speak." This is how Turin began. Okay, so that's part 2. We'll be posting part 3, so it'd be lovely if you can carry on watching these readings. Okay, so much more to come.